Look, as much as you think you're some wilderness survivor, this is just camping. I just want to hang out here with my girlfriend in peace. So can you cut it with the bull? Andrew said to his friend through the tent as the sun began setting on the campsite. They had arrived a few hours early to an area that was supposed to be riddled with paranormal activity. They had arrived a few hours early to an area that was supposed to be riddled with paranormal activity. Andrew didn't much care for internet hoaxes, and he had gone to the spot, out of spite, just to dispute the claims of this so-called paranormal hotspot. But his friend Jeffrey thought differently. And Jeffrey swore he had seen something out there on one of his solo hikes, and he wouldn't shut up about it. He couldn't resist bragging about the encounter every chance he got, and how he had only survived due to his exceptional survival skills. Well, it's not like we're going to experience anything if we sit in this tent all night. Might as well get out there? Coaxed Penny, his girlfriend. She had brought a camcorder along just to make sure she could capture anything they would see. But Andrew was certain they wouldn't. Ugh, this is bear country. We should at least keep an eye out for those, Andrew replied, giving in as he got to his feet. They left the campsite and began walking up the rocky hill to the site where the paranormal activities were reported to be the most prevalent. From what Andrew had read on the forums, at 7 on the dot, the entity would spiral out of the face of the rock and kill anyone who was in range. He rolled his eyes at the thought that something would emanate from a rock. But Penny seemed to be interested in taking a walk, and Jeffrey was overly excited about something which was supposed to kill him, so he tagged along. As they got to the top of the hill, Andrew let out a deep breath, taking in the clean air. Compared to the city, the air out there was a lot fresher, and the view of the surrounding forest was breathtaking. Trees spanned for several miles in all directions, with a raging river at the far end. "It's beautiful," Andrew whispered. "Crazy to think so many people have vanished up here," Jeffrey said out loud, looking at his watch. "We made it just in time. We have a minute." Andrew turned around, looking at the single boulder on the top of the hill, where the entity was supposed to emerge from. He watched for a moment, holding his breath as the minute counted down. Once it was 7, he felt a chill run down his spine as Penny pointed the camcorder at the rock, waiting for something to happen. "I think something has to be wrong," Jeffrey admitted. "Something was supposed to happen." "Well, I guess the view was worth it. Crazy boulder of death excluded," Andrew replied. "All right, let's head back to the camp before it's too dark." "We can use the flashlight from the camcorder," Penny replied, turning to Andrew. He began nodding as their eyes locked. Andrew saw the fear in her eyes, and he tried to make sense of the sudden change of her demeanor. He began to smile for a moment, thinking she was trying to scare him. But then, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Andrew's mind raced wildly, trying to read the faces of Penny and Jeffrey in front of him. He looked down at the arm on his shoulder to see a hairy mass with sharp claws digging into him. Before he could make a sound, Andrew felt a shove from behind, and he stumbled into the others, sending them all tumbling down the other side of the hill. Andrew heard Penny scream as they rolled through the dirt. He smashed his head against a rock, and he heard his arm snap loudly as he slammed into a tree with all of his weight behind it. Andrew turned to his side, looking up to see Jeffrey running over to him with a gash across his forehead. "Andrew? Andrew, are you okay?"
Huh?
Andrew looked down at his arm, his body in shock over what had happened. His mind tried to process it, looking at his arm which hung off at an odd angle. It was obviously broken. My arm. Come on! It's still after us! Jeffrey shouted urgently, knowing there was no time. He grabbed Andrew's good arm and hoisted it over his shoulder and began running in the opposite direction. They had fallen on the wrong side of the valley, further away from their tents. They would have to go around the hill to get back to the safety of the camp. Penny, Andrew let out a breath, trying to slow Jeffrey down. We have to go back. For Penny, please, let's go. You're bleeding. We have to get you safe first, Jeffrey replied, looking up to see a cave ahead. Wait for me here. I'll go back for her. Come on. Jeffrey helped Andrew, carrying him all the way into the cave. Everything felt like a blurry mess of pain. His body hurt all over, with blood oozing from where his bone had jutted out of his arm. He felt lightheaded and knew he had to do something to help Penny, but he couldn't clear his head. As they got further into the cave, Andrew tripped and pulled Jeffrey along with him as they slid downhill, deeper into the depths. They fell in a heap, but for how far they had fallen, it wasn't as dark as they expected. They looked up to see a scattering of firelight lit around the cave. On closer inspection, the fires were burning torches that were hung in a circle, casting lambent light on 3 beings gathered in the middle. Each of them was at least 8 feet tall, with their arms so long they dragged on the floor. Andrew looked up at the entities as their fall into the cave drew their attention. Despite their hairy bodies and long arms, their faces were unerringly human, with the only difference being their eyes. They glowed an ethereal white in the darkness, piercing Andrew's soul. But what captured his attention the most in this dreadful scene was seeing who they held in their arms. Penny's eyes rolled to the back of her head, while one of the entities lowered her body from its bloody mouth, with her innards dripping from its teeth and falling to the floor with a sickening splat. Andrew let out a hollow scream as he felt a shaggy limb wrap itself around him.
Subscribe today, or beware.